Sometimes I dream of white silence, of a world held still beneath a sheet of light. In that dream, time doesn't flow. It condenses, it crystallizes into silence, into pressure, into secrets buried for millions of years. Antarctica is not a place, it is memory made solid. Not frozen in death, but suspended in waiting. You can feel it when you breathe there. The air is ancient, brittle, too clean. Light has nowhere to go but reflect endlessly off the skin of glaciers, casting halos across the snow like echoes of forgotten suns. She once stood at the edge of a frozen cliff, her blonde hair lashed by wind that had circled the globe. She said nothing, just watched, as if waiting for the horizon to blink. Her breath left small clouds in the air, dissolving like thoughts she chose not to speak. I remember thinking how she looked not at the ice, but through it, through the millennia compacted beneath her boots. As if she could hear something murmuring beneath all that weight. Because under the ice, the world is not dead, it whispers. Beneath those 2 kilometers of frozen light lie lost rivers, fossilized forests, and bacteria that last saw daylight when Earth was ruled by reptiles. Antarctica holds 90% of the planet's ice, and in that ice, 60% of all the fresh water on Earth. That's not a statistic. That's the heartbeat of the climate, ticking in slow motion, waiting to be broken. And somewhere deep beneath it all, ancient canyons stretch farther than the Grand Canyon, and lakes like Vostok sleep untouched, sealed from time. We thought we had centuries. The glaciers were slow, predictable, indifferent. But now they groan. They shear and split and spill. Thwaites, the Doomsday Glacier, is already collapsing, pouring 50 billion tons of ice into the ocean each year. That glacier alone accounts for 4% of current sea level rise. Scientists once said we had a few hundred years before it gave way, then decades. Now, the cracks are widening. The countdown has begun. But what if it didn't wait? What if all the glaciers, not just Thwaites, surrendered in a single decade? What if time, held in ice for millions of years, thawed all at once and surged into the present? It began not with an explosion, but with a breath, a warmth too subtle to notice, until the ice started weeping. Not melting, but weeping. Tiny rivulets traced their way down ancient surfaces, erasing epochs in moments. It happened in pulses, a slow drip, then a shudder, then the roar. Icebergs the size of cities detached with a sound like thunder breaking its voice. And suddenly, what had been a continent of stillness became a flood. The girl was there again, this time not on the ridge, but standing ankle-deep in water that had no business being there. Her reflection blurred in the rising pool beneath her, her expression unreadable. She didn't run, she listened, to the cracking of old bones beneath her feet, to the howl of air rushing through new canyons carved by collapse. The sky above her had darkened, not with storm, but with silence, anticipating what would come. Across the globe, the sea began to rise. Not inch by inch, but in gulps, 2 feet, 4, 8. San Francisco swallowed, Miami gone, New York a memory of glass and salt. Jakarta, Lagos, London, all turned ghost blue beneath the weight of water. The ocean did not rage, it simply took, as if reclaiming what was always meant to be temporary. Coastlines redrawn like sketches in wet ink, entire countries drowned not in war, but in quiet. And yet, not all waters rose. Near Antarctica, the sea retreated. That paradox, one of gravity's strange betrayals, haunted the scientists. You see, the Antarctic ice sheet is so massive, it pulls ocean water toward it with its own gravity. And when it vanishes, so does the pull. Water migrates outward, flooding distant shores while leaving the source behind, sunken in absence. Rivers of fresh water now pour into salt, disrupting the old dance of currents that have regulated life for millennia. The thermohaline conveyor, Earth's great oceanic breath, is losing rhythm. Heat no longer moves as it should. The planet begins to forget how to balance. Weather systems twist, confused. Some regions burn, others drown under unfamiliar skies. And we are left breathless, running simulations, drawing maps, building walls that cannot hold. The future arrives not as prophecy, but as floodwater beneath our doors. I used to think cities were permanent, steel and stone, glass and grid, but permanence is a story we tell ourselves to feel safe. Now those stories drift beneath the surface. I picture them, not ruined, just paused. Subways turned into aquariums, street lamps flickering beneath the tide, playgrounds and churches, airports and stadiums, all muted by the weight of water. The ocean doesn't destroy them, it silences them. like breath held too long. She walks now where avenues once pulsed with life, not in panic, but as if remembering. Her boots leave no prints, only a slow wake. Behind her, the glass tip of a skyscraper protrudes like the last breath of a drowned idea. Fish dart through the broken windows of boardrooms. Moss blooms along marble columns. Somewhere, beneath 70 meters of rising ocean, the Jefferson Memorial sleeps, its dome a pale shadow in the blue. Fenway Park echoes only with the sound of kelp brushing concrete. 3 billion people lived by the coast. Lived. Past tense. Some fled inland, climbing hills with only memories in their arms. Others never had time. Their cities became salt and silence. Bangladesh vanished in a week. Venice never stood a chance. The east coast of the United States, gone in a month. The global map is rewritten daily, not by hand, but by tide. And then there's the water beneath the water. Aquifers that once held our cleanest drink have been tainted by the sea. Fresh becomes brine. Wells spoil. Crops wither not from drought, but from drowning in salt. The line between thirst and flood blurs until the two become indistinguishable. We have too much water, and none we can drink. But the worst monsters don't come in waves. They wake in silence. As ice vanished, it released more than water. It released memory. Bacteria preserved in stasis, older than language. Some harmless, some hungry, some whispering resistances to the antibiotics we've grown used to. Not science fiction, just evolution, uninterrupted for 100,000 years, and now finally free. Still, not everything released from the ice is a threat. Some microbes offer secrets. Enzymes to heal, proteins that devour pollution, even alternatives to the plastics choking our seas. But they are raw, wild, indifferent to us. We do not command them, we unleash them. And with each new melt, the boundary between salvation and contagion grows thinner. The girl surfaces again in my mind. She presses her palm to the glass of a submerged building. A library, maybe. Her breath fogs the visor of her helmet. She doesn't wipe it away. Perhaps she prefers not to see what's lost too clearly. Or perhaps she's waiting to see what rises next. There's a kind of silence only ancient ice can hold. Not the quiet of sleep or snow, but something deeper, something fossilized. For millions of years, that silence lay unbroken, until the melt reached the deepest seams, and the earth exhaled. What escaped wasn't just water, it was time, thawed and unfinished. In subterranean vaults below the glaciers, we found what should have remained undisturbed. Microbial relics, older than memory, still alive. They drift now in currents they do not recognize. Inside Lake Vostok, sealed beneath 4 kilometers of ice for 15 million years, organisms stir that evolved alone, untouched by sunlight, by predators, by us. Imagine that. An ecosystem unspoiled by history, a genetic library with no readers, until now. And as our hands reached in, clumsy, curious trembling, we forgot that unlocking ancient things comes at a cost. The first contaminations were microscopic. A sickness here, an anomaly there. But the symptoms spread. Slowly, then faster. We've always feared the meteor, the supervolcano, the sudden flash in the sky. But what if the quiet thaw was more dangerous? Some of these organisms don't kill, they linger, they alter. Bacteria with genes resistant to every drug we know now dance with our own microbial passengers, sharing instructions we were never meant to receive. And still we search deeper, hoping that among the threats we might find cures. Compounds that reverse disease, enzymes that clean our mess. Life that doesn't just survive collapse, but redefines what survival means. She kneels now by the edge of a melt pool, where the ice gives way to dark water. Fingers trail the surface. Steam coils around her wrist. Somewhere beneath, something moves. Not toward her, but upward. Slowly. There's no fear in her eyes, only wonder. And I wonder too, how much of what we call dangerous is just unfamiliar. But the ice hides more than biology. It veils topographies. Beneath it lie valleys larger than any we've mapped. A canyon system longer than the Grand Canyon, carved not by wind or rain, but by pressure and silence. No satellite ever saw it. No foot ever touched it. Until the thaw. Now these scars resurface, stories written in stone, waiting for light to read them again. The Earth, it turns out, has been hiding from us as much as we've been hiding from it. In that newly revealed geography, something shifts. Not just the land, but our place upon it. The maps we drew crumble. The center moves, familiar coastlines vanish, the notion of homeland dissolves. We become again wanderers. The ocean is not just water, it is breath. a slow planetary inhale and exhale, pulling heat, moving salt, ferrying life across hemispheres. But now something in its rhythm has broken. The great conveyor, the thermohaline current, falters. Fresh water from glaciers dilutes the seas, softens the salt, erases the weight that once pulled surface water into the deep. The currents confused stutter, and the ocean forgets how to breathe. Without the sinking and rising of water, nutrients stop cycling. The deep can no longer feed the surface. Phytoplankton, those microscopic green engines that build the ocean's food web, begin to starve. They fade like stars before sunrise. And with them, life follows. Fish scatter, whales grow thin, coral bleaches and breaks. Entire ecosystems unspool like threads cut loose. But in the chaos, strange blooms appear. Where the glaciers bled iron into the water, algae blossoms in sudden clouds. Unnatural, vivid, enormous. For a brief moment, the seas glow with potential. More photosynthesis, more carbon pulled from the sky, a surge of false hope. Because these blooms are unstable, they collapse as quickly as they flare, and when they die, they rot. Fungi in warm waters feast on their remains, releasing carbon dioxide in return. The ocean, once our greatest ally against the heat, now exhales the very fire it once quelled. The air grows thicker, wetter, meaner. The average global temperature surges, 5 degrees, then 7, then more. Weather becomes unruly. Storms stretch across continents. Monsoons find cities they've never touched. Drought burns through green belts once thought untouchable. The planet begins to feel like a greenhouse without doors. And still she walks, across a dry ocean floor where currents once danced. The girl, now in a pressure suit, helmet off, breath slow, around her, petrified coral like bone-white sculptures. She steps carefully, as if not to wake the ghosts of the sea. Her shadow stretches impossibly long in the angled sun, painting the silence with a kind of grace. She pauses to kneel beside a fossilized starfish, brushing away sand as though uncovering memory. I think of how long we believed the oceans would always be there. Constant, calming, predictable. But they were never stable, just slow. And now that slowness is gone. We thought climate was a backdrop, it was the stage itself. And as it collapses, so does the script we were writing. And then, the noise stopped. Not because the world healed, but because there was no one left to scream. The sea had taken what it needed. The skies had emptied their rage. The ice had spoken. What remained was not ruin, but silence. A silence so complete it rang in the bones. Cities were gone, borders erased. Time itself felt unanchored, drifting like ash above what used to be home. But in that silence, something moved. Not loudly, not with triumph, just movement. A sprout, green and delicate, unfurling from the wet soil of a newly exposed Antarctic coast. Sunlight, warmer than it should be, rested on its leaves like a whisper of permission. It wasn't salvation, just continuity. Life didn't win, it persisted. She stood among it, hair pulled back, jacket open, her eyes catching the light as she turned toward the horizon. Behind her, a wrecked satellite dish, half buried in moss. Ahead, the shimmer of a lake that hadn't existed a month before. Lake Vostok now lay bare, breathing its secrets into the open air. Somewhere in its depths, organisms still dreamed in darkness, unaware that their time had finally come. She dipped a flask into the lake, not to drink, to remember. The new climate isn't one we chose, it's one we triggered. Permafrost thaws like a corpse warming in the sun, releasing methane in giddy eruptions. Microbes feast on the old world's flesh. With each passing year, the heat compounds. Earth's fever doesn't break, it intensifies, and yet, people migrate, north, south, to the mountains, to what remains. Canada becomes a coastline. Greenland hosts vineyards. The map, once filled with cities, now marks shelters, crossings, routes of water and shade. And still, not all is lost. We find fragments of music on broken hard drives, of stories carved into the walls of submerged temples, of names scratched into lifeboats. We carry these like talismans, the human archive, condensed into memory and skin. I wonder if the earth will remember us, not our wars or economies, but the way we loved, the way we reached for meaning even as the tide took everything else. Maybe it will remember her, the girl who watched the glaciers break and didn't look away, who walked the drowned world not to escape it but to witness it. She was never a savior, she was a mirror. Now, the silence thickens again, not from emptiness but from awe. This isn't the end. It's the space between endings. And in that breathless space, a question remains. What if the flood was never punishment, but permission? What if the planet in breaking was just beginning to speak? What if the next world is already here?